Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the A&S Professional Services webinar. I'm Adam Spur, and I run the business applications practice here at A&S. Let me do a couple of things before we start, which is share the slide deck. So delighted to be joined by Mark. Hello, Mark, of BDO for this session. Mark spends his time helping and advising businesses on how they drive and manage change. And the topic of the day, I don't know whether you've branded this, Mark, is RETHINK, right? Yep. How they rethink business. Is that a BDO internally branded program?
Yeah, I'll touch on that in a second as we go through. But yeah, effectively, it's we were trying to work out how to make sense of the whole lockdown and everything going on economically and how to approach it. And rather than just knee-jerk reacting, we actually came up with the RETHINK concept, which I'll share in a second, just to help us position things right, and very relevant it's proven to be. So.
Cool. So you've been a customer of ours, Mark, now for nearly, I was trying to think earlier, about 4 years now.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've asked Mark to talk about 3 or 4 different things. Obviously, one of those is RETHINK and what's been happening with that, how that's worked for BDO and how that's worked for the customers, and then just segueing into what that's meant for you in terms of CRM, and then you can share a little bit of your CRM journey if that works.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. What you've seen, learnings and advice. Couple of people on the phone. You know, there's from my team. There's probably Neil's on and Gary's on and Daniel's on. So if you've got any questions, they'll be happy to. The people on the call, they'll be happy to answer the questions at that point. So the agenda is relatively straightforward. I like to do things in threes. We're going to talk very quickly about A&S and professional services, then talk with Mark, and Mark, I'll give you control and you can share your slides at that point. And you know, as most people know, the professional services market in the UK now is absolutely huge. It's about 11% of the UK's GDP, over 190 billion and over 4.6 million. And it is actually, it's no surprise then that it is actually, professional services is a huge sector for both Microsoft, and it's the biggest sector, in fact, for A&S in business applications in terms of revenue and customer numbers. So we're very, very aware of what goes on in the business in the professional services sector. We're very concerned with where it's going and how it's going, and getting people like Mark to come on and educate and talk to people about it. So so very quickly then, for those people who don't know about A&S, I'm going to just say 3 things, which is we're a 300-person organization founded in 1996, and we have a 50-50 split of public and private sector customers. So the majority of our private sector customers are in the professional services space. As you can see, weirdly, when I was putting up this slide, it would appear that most of our professional services customers have 3-letter names: CBI, NGA, MSX, CDW, BDO. So I thought that was quite strange. But in effect, what we're actually focused on is 3 areas, which is helping our customers get into the cloud, and then helping our customers move to cloud-based business applications such as Dynamics and the Power Platform, and then helping them make sense of the data, turning data into information, information into knowledge, and knowledge, therefore, into wisdom. Many people just stop at, I've got some information, let's see what we can do with that. So last point for me is immensely proud that this year, 2020, A&S were UK Partner of the Year for Microsoft. And then we're also the highest ranking Dynamics partner. So that's my one nod to a credibility slide. Just introducing Mark, as is my role. Mark's a runner, and he's doing the Great North Run this week. You know, the last time we met in person, Mark, you weren't quite as fit as you are today, I think it's safe to say. So you are bucking the trend completely in lockdown. But Mark's a partner at BDO. BDO, obviously one of the global firms of accountants. Top 5, I think, is when I read about that now. And Mark's responsible for delivering outsourcing and business advisory services. Spend a lot of time with the SMEs in the Northwest. I'm correct in that, aren't Mark? And but also working globally to develop alignment across a number of member firms. So, Mark, I'm sure everybody's going to be interested, as I am, in how you've reported over 20% growth this year for 5 consecutive years, but including 20% growth through lockdown as well.
Yep.
So I'm certainly interested in how you've been doing that. So let me unshare. Yeah, and then I'm just going to give you you can share your slides, and we'll go from there.
Perfect. Just got a donut appearing on my screen, which is never a good sign. There we go. And give it a second.
And I'll do the 2 things that everybody does in 2020. I'll make sure everybody's not on mute. You're on mute, and then Mark, I can absolutely see your slides, so we're all good to go.
Yay, brilliant. Okay, hopefully people can hear me. Hopefully people can see the slide. Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction there, Adam. I'm just going to start off explaining a little bit about Rethink and why we've gone down that route and how it fits. So Adam's kind of given the background to BDO, UK 5th largest, globally 5th largest, but very much focused on the mid-market as well. 162 countries, 85,000 staff, professional staff worldwide, and so forth. So load of numbers we can rattle off. But actually the bit that the reason I do the job I do is because I like working with businesses and like finding ways to help them. And if we all remember back, we were doing fantastically as a business, and I think so many businesses were. In fact, I had an amazing contract to go in and advise SME businesses on their growth plans and their ambition for the future. And going all the way up to lockdown, all the conversations I was having with businesses were about how they wanted to expand into new countries, or they wanted to grow in this direction, launch new products. And then suddenly lockdown happens. And I was actually in Denver just before that. I was actually making my way to the airport and suddenly got tipped off that they were about to close the airport to all flights coming back to the UK. So I made it back just in time, or for some people they might view that was unfortunate that they didn't quite get me. But anyway, so came back over, but I was in Denver talking with BDO globally about how we can align our services. And suddenly overnight the world shifts. And if we just go back in our thinking to what took place then was, I'm sure everyone was the same. We got inundated with daily updates from the government, inundated with furlough flyers, and every professional services firm firing out daily updates on this piece of guidance or that piece of guidance. It was a race to be the first person to put a piece of guidance out. And if you stopped and spoke to the businesses, they were literally just putting the stuff straight in the bin or not downloading it because they were just inundated. And to be honest, it was out of date by the time they read it. So you would publish something overnight. By the time the next day came, Rishi would be standing up and saying, actually, we just want to slightly revise the rules and the terms. Really hard for professional services to navigate what they should be doing in terms of advice. Really hard for businesses to make sense of what was going on. So we actually, instead of rushing into 1,000,001 flyers and letting every team within the UK put their own version of the flyer out, and again, many professional service firms here will probably recognise that quite often we get into those silo mentalities. So announcement from the government about CBILS loans, one team turns around and says, hey, that's my area because it's to do with loans, and the next team put their hand up and said that's my area because it's to do with forecasting, and hey, that's my area because it's to do with business strategy. And before you know it, you get 3 versions of a flyer going out from 3 different teams, and it just becomes a bit of a nightmare. So how do you get a professional services firm to not do that, and instead to try and glue together the bits so that actually you deliver the right advice and support for businesses? So we actually didn't rush to do all of those publications. I won't say we didn't do any, but we did very much kind of say to teams, can we just slow it down a little bit, which was incredibly counterintuitive, because at a time when businesses were panicking about what they do, we were saying to people, can you just slow down and not rush to send out lots of flyers and lots of content? And this was what came out to basically try and make sense of what we were doing, and we call it the RETHINK model. There was an earlier iteration of it which had an extra peak in it, but we decided 3 peaks was better than 4. And actually this has been adopted by BDO member firms across the whole of the world. So it's now shaping our strategy going forward. And what we had was, as businesses locked down, that left-hand side was React. And there are other versions of this from other people, but this is the one that we came up with and we are using with our clients. And the React piece is exactly as I described. As professional service firms, we reacted by thinking the right approach, get the teams home, get them working from home, and send 1 million flyers out to people to see whether we can help them. And actually, in reality, was it the right reaction? Did it have maximum impact to help clients? And the focus of React, it is very much actually just dealing with the emergency. So in reality, most businesses in React phase were, I want my staff to be safe. I want to know that I've got my cash in the bank. And I want to make sure that I can keep trading and keep operating and cut any unnecessary costs. And that, again, if there was anything different going on, there might be exceptions, but most people went down that route. There were businesses where they reacted by saying, hey, the government have asked us to produce PPE. So they rushed in and said, we can do that. We've got a factory, we can make it. And it's really interesting now, some of those businesses have produced substandard, poor quality products because they reacted. And actually the best examples I've got through COVID were businesses not doing that, but slowing their thinking and just making sure that they actually looked at what they were good at, what they could help with, and then they actually focus on those things rather than just doing that reaction. So that was the React. We then, and we probably are still in a resilience phase. Resilience is keeping going. And so therefore it's kind of making sure that we can keep operating, keep advising, keep supporting, keep working together, keep the staff motivated, still avoiding unnecessary expenditure and focusing on making sure that the things we're doing are productive and efficient. And then some businesses are there, although I slightly question that, because I think if we have a second spike, you might well be actually further back than you thought. But the realize phase, and this is where the rethink bit comes, because I really hope that we don't just go back to where we were before, because all I've seen through the whole of lockdown is acceleration of the things we knew we needed to do anyhow. So actually cloud accounting has accelerated because businesses needed to do it, and now suddenly they had the burning bridge because they're all working remotely. They all need to get the information, and so what we saw was literally businesses needing to migrate to cloud. Home working, flexible working. We all knew that it was absolutely crazy that we would jump in a car and spend 2 hours commuting into our nearest city just for the privilege of listening to the radio in the morning, when we could talk to people on Teams. And actually, we've now learned that we can actually talk to more people, wider jurisdictions this way. So I was talking to the DIT earlier, and we were having conversations about the fact that I can do business with Australia just as easily as I can do business with Chorley in the Northwest, if you're not from the Northwest. And yeah, so effectively, businesses have real opportunity to think differently and make the most of the opportunities. That's not belittling the tragedy and the very sad situation, but it's trying to make sure that the best comes out of this horrible situation that we find ourselves in. And so the realize and the reason for calling it rethink is we actually want businesses not to just do what they were doing before and go back. We want them to look at what they actually could have done better. Did they react in the right way? Did they have the right way of making decisions? Did they have the right teams? Did they have the right services? Were they selling in the right ways, and so forth? And did they have the right technology? And so therefore, actually, this realize phase is really important because that's about making sure the businesses that come out on the back of this are more resilient, more able to succeed, and able to grow quicker. So that's our approach. That's what we're up to. And this has been really helpful because it's framed, going back to the professional services environment, it means that all our teams within the firm recognize that if they're doing stuff, it needs to somehow fit that. So is it helping businesses with their resilience phase? Or is it that there are things businesses are doing to get around realize, and we haven't got a solution, so we need to develop a solution around it? So it's shaping our investment, it's shaping how we work, and actually it's very relevant for how we worked, because we had the same situation. So we're actually looking at this for internal training, and we're using it within our local teams to help them think about how they can do things better and differently. So that broadly is how we dealt with the situation we're in. And I won't go through all of this, don't worry, but effectively, as you start to work through that, you put your mind in the place of the client. And as you think about the different areas of business, the people, customers, operations, infrastructure, financial risk, and regulation, what we start to say is, so what were the things that they had to do, the key issues for the client in terms of React? So you can see React, employee well-being, retaining your customers, protecting your infrastructure. Then you look at resilience, keeping going. It's keeping staff productive, looking at optimizing how you work and engage with your customers, making sure your infrastructure is resilient. Risk is I am not from a risk background as such. And I have to say, hats off to those guys, because as businesses disrupted what they did, very few actually stopped to think about what does that mean for the controls and safety and the risk management within the organization. So I dread to think where all of the compliance processes are at the moment, how you approve things and comply with ISO 27001 and things. But actually, it's really important now in this resilience phase, we put the right controls in place, or we'll have more cyber attacks and so forth, and more fraud. And then realize, what does that mean? What do our staff need to do in the future? How do we get new customers? That's actually a really tough one for people. In this current world, how do you get new clients? Professional services find that really difficult, because we are still often wedded to old school ways of doing it. Networking events. Well, I can't do a networking event unless it's less than 6 people and we stay at 1 meter apart. And you can't do that in the north because we're not allowed to meet each other. You've got how do I reach out to those different places? Who are my customers? How do I know how they're doing? And so suddenly in all of this, technology does play a massive part, because everything there, when you look at it, managing your workforce, understanding your customer behavior, making sure people are doing what you need them to do, making sure they're productive, looking at the risk, the controls, the processes, all of those things are driven, aren't they, from the systems that we are operating on. So we are seeing a massive uptick in terms of people saying, help, what do we need to do with our systems? And that's playing very nicely, because we are doing business outsourcing and advising businesses around that. That's why we are continuing to see growth, because actually it's incredibly relevant. When you take this RETHINK model, it shows how relevant it is what we do to what the challenges are that businesses are facing.
Mark, a couple of questions for you, if I may.
Sorry.
So, first question is, there's two different things here. I think great model, right? Two different things here. There's one which is, if you could just share with us, BDO. I can imagine how it's very difficult, because when I look at a lot of professional services firms we deal with, they are reasonably traditional. It's people in ties in offices having meetings.
Yep.
So how has that played out on the BDO scale with the people and the office environment? Yep. And then second question is just to mirror that on, that's a lot of stuff if you're an SME to be thinking about. And if I'm an owner manager or a small board of SMEs, that's a difficult task for me.
So I'll do, if I do take those the other way around, so I'll take the latter one. Yeah, it is, and that's why our React, the thing we didn't do was all the furlough flyers. Instead, what we did was a very simple campaign of just talk to your clients and capture the conversation. So we've got dynamic CRM system in place. And what we did was, using the CRM system, we were able to structure some well-placed questions. So because a lot of people in professional services, we like to think we're the expert, don't we? We've got the answer. And there was a really interesting conversation, which was actually saying, it's not about me having all the answers. I've got my areas of expertise, but it's about knowing that I'm part of a partnership, part of a professional services firm. So somewhere in there, somewhere amongst my colleagues or my wider network, I can help you. And so what we did was, we basically had a campaign which was talk to your client. And through the whole of the COVID cycle, rather than firing flyers out to people, we just told 5,500 people to please pick up the phone and just ask your client how they're doing, which was so relevant. The number of conversations which went something like, thank you, thank you for the time of just talking to me, because I've not had anyone to talk to about all of this stuff. Those business owners were so locked down in dealing with all of the things you can see on the screen in front of you that they were basically bottlenecks. They were, they'd actually, to make quicker decisions, they'd cut people out, which actually is not a wrong approach. If you look at the government, they did it with their COBRA teams and things. So you kind of narrow your decision-making process. But unfortunately, by doing that, you become very much isolated. And so business owners became more isolated. So showing yourself, rather than here's another thing for you to read, another thing for you to read, instead can you just tell me what you're trying to do? Actually just a sounding board for the business, whereas where as a professional services firm we really stepped into our own. And it was lovely as well, because we saw more junior stuff, because we had used the CRM system to structure the conversation. It allowed them to feel more empowered to go and have those conversations. But then because we captured it, I now have a massive database which I can put into Power BI, showing me, for example, that Scotland was less likely to furlough their staff, less likely to make staff redundant. Or you can see that the hardest hit sector was the charity sector, followed by the retail sector. Or you can see that the most common government measure that was adopted was actually the VAT deferral scheme. And you can see all of that. Or you can see which sectors did what, because we used the CRM system to capture that data, and then we could report it out, which is still now informing the approach we're taking. So going back to it, yes, it's very hard for the SMEs, and that's why we have a role to play, but it's not always selling. It's sometimes just being there to help the client. We all know that leads to opportunities, but the starting point was, please just listen to your clients because they need you. And I hate to say it, I think we're going back into another period. We've got March next year, we're going to have to repay the VAT. CBIL loans are going to have to be paid back. The furlough schemes are ending. Those businesses are feeling it right now. And we see that because we capture the data on the inquiries coming in, and we can see that there is an uptick going on at the moment in terms of inquiries. And because of that, we know that we need to get our people back out there having those conversations with their clients again. Going back to this, customer retention, really important part. And that's how we know that now is the right time to push back out with that. So that was the second part. Actually, it's really interesting. Actually, very few partners are now wearing ties. So I have to say that's one of the things from Rethink I would love to hang on to, that we don't go back. Sorry to any tie manufacturers out there, but it's that acceleration up has been so enlightening for people, because I think exactly as you say, quite often these accounting firms or law firms or professional service firms, they establish their ways of working, and they've just been disrupted. They've shortened their decision making. They've had to do things they'd never have thought of doing without a lot of planning and preparation before, but they've had to do it overnight. I personally think that's in many ways been one of the best things ever, because it's showing them that actually we can make decisions quickly and make good decisions quickly. You just need to make sure you put the right steps in place for that. And so actually at the moment, I would say I'm enjoying a lot more relaxed, human, normal conversations with other professional practices within the organisation. And I think that sense of purpose as well. We're all in this together, aren't we, suddenly? So some of the kind of city communities really pulling together to say it's not about what your firm does or your firm does, it's how we collectively protect our city, how we collectively get the businesses back on their feet again. So some really nice behaviours coming out of that, and definitely an acceleration up of the good things, I would say.
Have you seen any of those policies sticking now? So, I mean, obviously, we're talking to you, and you're obviously at home, and as I am, and we're dressed more casually these days, and you see a little bit more human insight into the people who are, especially in a big organisation like yours. Are you seeing those behaviours stick, do you think, going forward?
Yeah, so I mean, probably the most common one is this home working situation, and obviously the news headlines at the moment is how do we get our city centres going again. I get the concern, so don't misunderstand anything that I say there. I get the concern, but I would also turn around and say that listen to what people are saying. The teams are saying they don't understand why they spent 2 hours a day sitting in a car putting pollution out into the environment. they are saying that it's really interesting looking at the life choices people are making. You say about my running, but interesting, I've got members of staff who are moving more into the countryside, moving parts of the country. Actually, I've got to just go on to it. Very quickly, we did some research into what the economy could look like. And if you look there, it talks about a second peak and employment getting up to 10% if there's a second peak that actually sticks for a while and so forth. So there's some interesting data we got to try and make sure we're looking at the economy. But impact of working from home, and which you nicely teed up there, but you didn't even know this was on the slides. That's great. But one thing coming out from this is, look, 270,000 people could potentially move away from London and other major cities and move into more rural areas. So north of England, where we're based, could see 43,000 more people choosing to live up here. So we're seeing displacement go on. Now that's macroeconomic stuff. Down at the human level, staff are just saying that actually, I like that my son gets on the bus from just over there, and I can actually take my son to the bus. I haven't been able to do that for 20 years or whatever. I can now take my son over the road, drop him off at the bus, and then get back and then start my day because I'm not commuting. So I think the remote working is here to stay. I think we will see people go back to the office for things. I think the role of the office will be there, but different, more about innovation, training, learning. And so I think distributed workforce will be here. What that looks like, I think there will be an element of shifting back slightly, but I certainly hope it is not everyone pointlessly jumping on trains and going into city centres. I think it'll be much more, this is how we work. And that again plays into, therefore, you do need to make the changes to your control environment, you do need to make the changes to your systems, and you need to look at the skills of your people, because we need people who will follow the processes, do what they're asked to do, etc., more so than ever, because you're not going to be able to stand over them. So
bit of a cultural mindset shift as well, isn't to a dispersed workforce, remote working, more trust, less command and control.
Yeah.
But as you rightly say, if you got 5,500 people talking to the customers, you're fairly reliant on people updating something so that you can get some information out of it.
Yeah, and the other bit I've touched on a few times, and I am sure everyone here from professional services firms recognise this. It's the gluing together the bits. One thing that an observational piece I've got is that as we put our teams into lockdown, phenomenal job from managers and line managers and whoever, in terms of just looking after people and making sure they're all right. We were worried about each other. Are you mentally okay? Are you coping with this? Are you keeping safe? Can you do what you need to do? And that's really good. But what it has also done is just slightly reinforced the silo mentality. My team looks after me. And the really important bit on this as well is, as that carries on in remote working, how do you get back to that environment where you have a cup of coffee with a colleague from another team and find out how their team's doing? When do you do that? Because we're all back to back with video calls. How do I make sure that I still build relationships with people? Because that's really important long term for myself, for other people, but also for developing the business and developing opportunities. And so we are going to go into a world when we're going to need to use, it will come down to some parts of technology and in some ways the skill sets, the people that we're working with, but we've got to glue things back together more so than maybe we used to have when we were physically co-located with other people.
So just shifting gears a bit. So let me ask you a couple of questions, and listen, if anybody's got any questions in the audience, please feel free to put them into the chat, and the guys will and myself will pick them up there. But quick couple of questions then, just around. Obviously, you've been a customer of ours for a while now. So top 3 benefits that you saw from deploying a CRM system. Obviously, one of the things that I love is you've got a scripted conversation about COVID and going out to your customers and talking to them about how they're doing. Just couple of bits on the CRM, if you would, Mark.
Yeah, and I have got some slides here because you did say you're going to come on to that. But don't worry, I'm not going to kill people by slides. Effectively, we call it BDO Core because it's our core system, but it's Dynamics 365 CRM. And we introduced it because way back before this, we thought we've got teams working in 14 offices across the UK. We need to somehow try and drive consistency, quality, make sure people are doing what they're doing. We looked at ways of having, if I need a specialist in this area, how could I make sure they're doing the work and I can triage work around the country and so forth. So it was we brought the CRM system in to deal with the distributed workforce. Ta-da! This is exactly where it's proven itself beyond belief. And actually, the teams now are sat there doing things like, it's great. I can give tasks and deliverables and objectives on Mark, because then I can make sure he's done it and I'm not waiting for him or anything. The managing quality and risk, because we've got our standard approach for things. So it makes sure we don't miss steps. So if we've taken on a new client, it makes sure we've not forgotten to do the conflict checks and the CTO. It makes sure that we've thought about, is it an audit client, and therefore I might have independence issues. So it drives in some of those checks, but it also allows me to look at a client and say, which stage is it at? How long has it been at that stage? So a bit like your kind of Deliveroo experience and where's it at, I can see any of my clients and see where their set of accounts is at and has it gone out the door. Again, in this world where I can't see anyone because they're elsewhere, I can see where the work is at. So I have confidence that deadlines are not going to be missed.
Right.
I can monitor things like engagement. I can see who's logging in regularly, who's clearing tasks, who's not doing that. And that engagement is really important. You've got to get people engaging. So we can see if people are dropping off for some reason and then engage. It might be that they actually need a bit of help and support. It might just be they're not engaging, and we need to just have that conversation. But we need that in a disrupted world. Tracking activities I've talked about. Identifying opportunities, though. So we haven't quite worked out, and answers on a postcard, how do you really do sales in this new world? We know some of it, but we don't really know all of it. So actually this, talking to clients and finding out themes. I've got a client and they've been talking to their account manager, and the account manager has said that they're thinking of buying a new machine. I don't need that individual to spot that that might be an R&D tax opportunity, or it might be an asset finance opportunity. I need the system just to document that I've got a client looking for a machine. It's then for the other teams to say, tell me any clients across the UK who might be currently looking to invest in a new piece of machinery, because I can help them with R&D tax credits. So again, in a slightly different way, if we just get our teams talking to the clients, which I've said is the best approach, the opportunities can come from other teams pulling data. Automating process, loads of bits where we've just automated things and speeded up and driven efficiencies. And we've talked about the data capture. So the CRM's really just proved its own, really, in terms of helping us cope with this situation. And if we hadn't have had that system, I dread to think how many Skype calls, phone calls, pads of paper, note-taking, minutes, emails we would all be dealing with. We haven't got time for that. So
So what putting in CRM then, Mark? What was the hardest part, tech or culture?
Yeah, right. It's kind of a mixture of the two. I'm going to sit on the fence. Culture is, if you haven't got it right, is going to be your biggest barrier. Because actually we had seen a lot of growth, and I saw the straining points that were coming. That was the trigger for saying we need some kind of solution, and we started looking through, and then came across yourselves and came across the CRM system. So because it had been bought into from the top effectively to say this is needed, it meant it was really easy just to keep saying to the teams, you've got to do it, you've got to do it. And in doing that, we built out dashboards, KPIs. So it's really interesting behaviors where people were not using it, and then you'd go into a meeting and say, well, I'm just bringing up your dashboard of how many times you've spoken to your clients and how many opportunities you've got. And when there was nothing on the system, and they would say, yeah, but I've got all this stuff and I've done this and I've done this. It's like, well, it's not on the system. And you had to drive that behavior. Unless it's on the system, it's not in. It's not happening. And as long as you have that tone from the top to drive the culture, that I think that's the key to success, actually. So culture probably is the hardest bit of it. The tech itself, I've got a few tips here, but the bit that I really liked about what you guys did was you held us to account. So right at the start, we talked about what we wanted to get out of it. And we didn't really know, because we don't put CRM systems in. So we didn't know really what we wanted, but we kind of knew what outputs we wanted. And you very much said to us, what are the outputs? What are the things? What are the things you need to achieve from this? And you boiled it down to saying there are just 3 things. There are 20 things that a CRM system can do for you, but it sounds like there are 3 things you're really needing from this. And if we achieve those 3 things, we've got success. So you simplified our thinking. And I think it's easy for us to come back because we're used as professional services to be a little bit arrogant and say, we know best, we know what's going on, we know our clients, etc. Yeah, but we don't know how to put CRM systems in. So you came back and very much said to us, focus on 3 things. We can do 4, we can do 5, but that's scope creep, and that will slow things down and you might miss some of your other objectives. Let's stick to the 3 and worry about the other things later on. So I think it's really important to, 1, recognize who the experts are in the room. 2, it's really important to stick to your scope, and if you want to vary it at the end or vary it when you know you need to. But don't, because the system can do X and Y as well, don't suddenly go off down that direction. Get your outputs, get to your end point, and then push adoption. And I think that absolutely was the right approach. And we got that, yeah. Well, we came in on budget, we came in on time, and the adoption rate within the team, even now, 4 years on. I was just yesterday recording a brief introductory video for anyone new that's joined the firm to say why they need to be using BDO Core and how it helps them make their lives much easier. So it's still right at the centre of what we're doing.
So final question for me. What advice would you give to other professional services firms thinking about going down this route?
Yeah, you're going to have to do something. So don't do the ostrich.
Especially now, right?
Yeah, you have not actually got a choice on this one. I don't know how you're going to do it if you're on a 20-year-old CRM system or something. So you're going to have to do something. I would say listen to the experts, because a CRM system, we've all got as professional services people an idea what CRM is, that thing that captures your contacts and it might track a little bit of marketing. As I said to you, we are tracking how COVID impacted the business. I'm able to tell you what trends are going on out there. We are using it to manage the workflows for the team and make sure people have done what they need to do. We're making sure things are being delivered on time. CRM is not just a superficial marketing tool. It's an embedded part of the organization, as long as you are just listening to taking the advice and working out what it is you need from the system. But if we were sat here now and I was talking to you about, we can capture our opportunities and we can make sure our proposals go out on time, it's not my biggest problem. My biggest problem is my distributed workforce and making sure they're doing what they need to do and making sure they're safe.
Great.
The system helps.
So Mark, thanks a lot for joining us today. Absolutely fantastic. I love hearing from you because you touch so many businesses across the UK. It's really interesting to see how your thinking has evolved. I know that you've been a great customer and advocate of ours and of using CRM, and I think that's born out of the relationship and what you've got out of the system rather than anything else. You guys have been incredibly successful, and that's been great to watch. So
and actually, just very quick, Adam, that's the other one thing I'll just very quickly say to people as well. We started off looking at building our own system, Could we develop using portals, and could we integrations and all of that? And actually, again, one of the things that went really well was you explained to us about actually, rather than building and developing and programming and all of that, the system probably does it for you. People develop this technology knowing what it needs to do. So it's actually more about configuring the system rather than building everything yourself. We have only ever configured what the system does and have been able through configuration to do all the things I referred to. Nice thing about that is every time an update comes or improvements, we get to take advantage of it because it just layers through the system. So throughout that 4 years, we've had improvements in how things look. We've had portals, we've had workflows, all sorts of things like that. And my team turn around and say, oh, there's a new feature that's just appeared, because we didn't choose to break the system. We chose to go with the system and just configure it to what we need. So again, just a little tip to people: don't feel that you have. I think
I will ask you one more question though, Mark, because it's obvious people get asked, right? So people always ask us about the resource overhead of internal team versus an external consultant.
Yep.
Maybe just quickly mention, you've built a team of people and of super users.
Yep.
And after we'd done the first bits with you, you've really owned the system and taken it forward from then.
Yeah, I think it's a bit more of a partnership than that. But yes, it's really important you do get someone who basically can run with the system, because there comes a point in time where you have to keep things going, don't you? So we did. We took on a couple of admins, super users, whatever phrase you want to use, and that has been great because they also like to come back and say, hey, I've spotted this new feature or something else, and I like things like that because they make me think, oh, we could use it in this way or whatever. So that works really well. That's the internal team. Having said that, we have yourselves in the background because every so odd bigger things happen, changes happen. Suddenly there's another system being introduced, there's an integration we need to deal with. The portals, we need portals. How do we go about doing that? So just knowing that we can reach out to people who do this all the time and say, how might we do that? How could that be dealt with? Is a really important part. So yeah, we started off, you guys absolutely ran the process, the implementation, and it came in on time and on budget. And we totally trusted you in terms of the process there, making sure we stuck to what we were doing. Then over time, much more of that has been done ourselves internally in terms of we want a new entity, a new configuration or something like that. That gets done by us. But we still like to know that behind the scenes, when bigger things happen or complications happen, we can reach out and say, help, what should we do with this? How can we deal with that? So it's just a shift over time, I'd say.
Yeah. I love, I've got a quick question for you from Paul. Love Paul's question, because as all professional services, we're interested in billing. CRM system integrating with your client billing system.
Yep.
What have you done about that?
Yeah, so we haven't done that. So, and the only reason is, I wish we had. The only reason we haven't done that is that we use this system within the outsourcing team. So within the firm of 5,500, this is being used in a team of 500 people effectively. So we are at the moment looking at putting it into the wider firm, and that is a project that's on at the moment. But this is being used within a sub-team. That means, therefore, when it comes to certain things like billing and WIP, we've stayed with the legacy system that's there. The firm are now updating that as well, so that's coming through. But it doesn't mean it's right. It's just what we've done. We did look at the time. The other side as well is to look at things like the integrations into Business Central and the other Microsoft products. We do use the integration with Outlook, so that is a real good feature that people like, the fact that we can push emails through, we can task created in the CRM system appears not only in Outlook, but it appears on your mobile phone, all of those features. The mobile app is fantastic, by the way, so that's great.
Just to round that out, one of our other accountancy firms, Cooper Parry down in the Midlands, they're using Business Central for their accountancy, and they've integrated the two together. So even to the extent of they've got a mobile app on the front now in a Power App, that they're starting billing, stopping billing on their mobile, that automatically goes all the way through and generates it out in an invoice. So
and it's a Microsoft product, so all those things like Power Apps and flows, and sorry, it's not my area, but those things, they're all there as features. So you can basically pull data out, you can push it into Power BI for reporting, you can push it out into your Outlook and things like that. So remember as well, it's got all of those standard kind of Microsoft type features as well, with being able to push and pull data.
Great. Bang on quarter two now. So Mark, thanks a lot for your time and effort. I'm sure my team will be following up just to make sure you've got the information. We recorded the video. We'll be putting that out in snippets and making the recording available as well. Any other questions, come back to Daniel or to Gary or to Neil or to myself, and follow Mark on LinkedIn as he continues to.
I'll put a cheeky request out if anyone wants to sponsor me this Sunday, doing it for Crohn's and colitis, because my wife, my oldest son both have Crohn's. So great call. So if anyone wants to sponsor, I would gratefully accept a sponsorship. It means I have to do it as well.
You've got a Just Giving page that we can find, Mark, right?
Yeah, Just Giving. There's a link on LinkedIn. If you go through there, look at my post, you'll see the link.
Great. All right. Thanks, everybody. Any more questions, come back to us. Mark, thanks a lot for your help. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Yeah, take care, everyone.
Cheers. Bye-bye.